Thanks for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, horrific killings, rapes and lootings. Human Rights Watch accuses fighters on both sides of the Ethiopian conflict of war crimes targeting Eritrean refugees. Before Tigray erupted in fighting last November, it had been a haven for those fleeing abuse across the border. Also, a ruthless ISIS chief in the Sahel has been killed by the French military. Adnan Abu Walid al-Sahrawi was France's most wanted in the region for masterminding several bloodthirsty attacks. The army says he was killed in an airstrike in Mali. And authorities in Yobe state say that a Nigerian army jet killed 9 civilians whilst on the hunt for insurgents. The Air Force has dropped an earlier denial and admitted it may have accidentally killed the locals. But first, Human Rights Watch has said that Eritrean refugees have been the victim of war crimes committed during 10 months of fighting in northern Ethiopia. Both Eritrean soldiers and the rebels fighting them in the region of Tigray have been accused of committing atrocities against Eritreans. Maria Gerth-Nicolescu tells us more.
The US-based NGO Human Rights Watch said it has received credible reports of killings, rapes and forced repatriations of Eritrean refugees in Tigray, with thousands of refugees still remaining unaccounted for. Eritrean soldiers allegedly killed 31 refugees in the Hitsats refugee camp, although the real death toll could be much higher. Eritrean and Tigrayan forces clashed in this refugee camp in November, only 2 weeks after the start of the conflict in Tigray. The report released by Human Rights Watch also accuses Eritrean soldiers of forcing refugees to return to Eritrea. Tigrayan forces also carried out revenge attacks against refugees after they took back some of those areas, accusations denied by the leaders of the TPLF. Eritrean troops have been present in Tigray ever since the conflict started in November 2020. Alongside forces of the Ethiopian National Army, they've been battling forces of the TPLF, the Tigray People's Liberation Front. Eritrea has been a long-time enemy of the TPLF ever since the Ethiopian-Eritrean War over 20 years ago. Before the current conflict, 92,000 Eritrean refugees were sheltered in Tigray in different refugee camps. Human Rights Watch said that all parties to the conflict should respect the freedom of movement of refugees. The organization also said that the atrocities committed amounted to clear war crimes.
Maria Gerth-Nicolescu there. Now, French military forces have confirmed the death of Adnan Abu Walid al-Sahrawi, the head of Islamic State in the Greater Sahara, ISGS. Now, he was France's top enemy in the region and was blamed for a string of brutal attacks across the Sahel. Al-Sahrawi was reportedly killed in an airstrike in Mali. Laurent Berstecker tells us more.
He was France's enemy number 1 in the Sahel. Adnan Abu Walid al-Sahrawi's death, which was confirmed Thursday by French authorities, was hailed as a major victory and a vindication of the much-criticized French military presence in the Sahel region.
It's military successes like this one that reinforce our determination to continue the fight against terrorism with our partners in the Sahel.
The leader of the Islamic State in the Greater Sahara, a local jihadist group which pledged allegiance to ISIS in 2015, al-Sahrawi was accused by France of overseeing attacks on U.S. troops, French aid workers, and thousands of African civilians. He was killed in a drone strike in southern Mali last month after French intelligence services narrowed down his location using information from captured insurgents. It then took special forces several weeks to identify his body. An elaborate operation which the French military chief of staff said would deal a major blow to the insurgent group.
This death represents a massive setback for the Islamic State in the Sahel.
Yet many experts warned the jihadists' threat in the region remained high, with a successor to al-Sahrawi likely to emerge in the near future.
It's like a lottery. When you kill jihadi figures or jihadi commandos like him, he's a veteran of jihad, you are taking chances to see who's going to come and take over after him.
Al-Sahrawi's death came just months after Paris announced plans to massively downsize its Barkhane operation, which has been deployed for 8 years in the Sahel region.
Now, the Nigerian Air Force has backtracked on an initial denial and admitted that it may have accidentally killed civilians whilst tracking down insurgents. A fighter jet opened fire in Yobe state on Wednesday, and local authorities say that at least 9 people were killed and several others were injured. Samuel Okoye tells us more.
The attack was carried out in Buhari village in Yobe state, northeast Nigeria. 9 people died, while 23 others were injured. The Nigerian Air Force initially denied reports that it was responsible for the incident, but it has now owned up, and in its new account of what happened, the Air Force said one of its planes was trying to bomb some jihadists operating in the area. Jihadist groups like Boko Haram and the Islamic State West African Province operate in the area. An investigation has been ordered into the incident to establish what exactly went wrong. Yobe State Governor Maimala Buni said it is important to carry out a thorough investigation so that a similar thing does not happen in future. The Nigerian Air Force is involved in lots of internal security operations around Nigeria. It has a reputation for sometimes hitting the wrong target. In June, villagers in Niger State said an Air Force plane bombed a group of wedding guests, killing some of them. But the worst incident occurred in 2017 in Ran village in Borno State. An Air Force jet mistakenly bombed a camp for internally displaced persons. Dozens of people, including aid workers, were killed, while 100 people were injured. This is the 4th time this year that an Air Force plane has hit the wrong target. This latest incident would raise fresh questions on how the Air Force conducts its operations.
Sam Olokoya there for us. Now, Somalia's Prime Minister has had his power to hire and fire officials revoked. President Mohamed Abdullahi Mohamed accuses his Premier, Mohamed Hussein Roble, of having violated the constitution and recklessly destabilising the country. The president intends that the freezing of his Prime Minister's executive powers will last until after elections due later this year. Mohamed and Roble have been mired in a deepening feud that some fear will undermine the already fragile electoral process. On Thursday, the UN said that more than 288,000 people have been affected by floods in Sudan. Most of the nation's states have been hit by heavy rains, and since June, dozens have been killed by rising waters. Nicholas Germain tells us more.
The floods in Sudan's White Nile state have been among the worst in the country. Torrential rains usually fall in Sudan between June and October. Since June, more than 80 people have died because of the floods. Crops and livestock have been destroyed. Residents here had to abandon their houses quickly.
We had to leave our homes barefoot. We had to leave our shoes behind. We need to fetch the rest of our belongings, but most of it is lost. The floods damaged our homes.
A camp hosting refugees from South Sudan was hit by floods, forcing thousands to flee towards dry areas.
We have been on the streets for the last 3 days and nights, in heavy rain, with our children. We have no shelter. We have nowhere to go.
On Thursday, the UN said more than 288,000 people had been affected by the floods in Sudan. Flash flooding has been reported in 13 out of 18 states across the country. Water levels of the Nile River have risen above flooding risk levels in many cities, including the capital, Khartoum.
Uganda is the only East African country that hasn't reopened primary schools since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic in March 2020. Over the last 18 months, only the wealthiest families have been able to sign their children up for online classes. With authorities fearing a new surge in COVID cases, it's still unclear for now when schools will reopen.
Since the beginning of the pandemic, 16-year-old Kavira has only had a few weeks of school. She's missed almost 2 academic years. Her mother's trying to homeschool her to help her catch up.
Let's talk about biology. Okay. The organisms. Do you know anything about organisms?
Kavira's mom has to buy school books from street vendors. They both find it hard to keep on top of key subjects.
We're just at home doing nothing. And if maybe you want to read forward, I just joined the new level, whereby I need explanation from the teacher.
Petronilla is worried about her children's future.
She has lost that guts to study. So even the young ones, they see people seated. My fear is that they can even adopt other habits which have not been there.
After 18 months without work, teachers are also finding it tough going.
I am told the teachers delayed to get salaries for last month. Is that true? We are losing human resource. We are going to lose experienced teachers. We are going to lose good teachers.
But authorities say the priority is preventing a new wave of infections.
There is still a need for having schools closed, but when you open, don't let all learners go back to school. So we are calling that opening in a phased manner, where you let a few classes go back to school.
So far, no date has been set for the reopening of schools. Authorities hope vaccinating teachers could be part of the solution.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa. Thanks very much for joining us, and do so again when you can. Take care.